Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today, we'll be exploring consequentialist or teleological theories of morality and social ethics. This presentation will introduce you to different approaches that focus on outcomes and how they affect society. I'm excited to guide you through these important concepts and their real-world implications. Let's dive in. Here, we're diving into the concept of moral theories, which are essential frameworks that help us decide what actions are right or wrong. These theories offer structured ways to think about ethics and guide our decisions. Some of the main approaches include consequentialism, which focuses on the outcomes of our actions, deontology, which emphasizes duties and rules, and virtue ethics, which considers the character and virtues of the person acting. Understanding these different perspectives gives us valuable tools to navigate complex moral questions. The glowing light bulb symbolizes insight and enlightenment, reminding us that moral theories illuminate the path to making ethical choices. Consequentialism is a family of moral theories that evaluates actions based on their outcomes. Essentially, actions are considered morally right if they lead to the best possible consequences. To give you a clearer picture, let's look at a couple of examples. First, in healthcare decisions, choosing treatments that maximize patient well-being is a perfect illustration of focusing on beneficial outcomes. The goal is to ensure the best possible health results for the patient. Second, environmental policy shows another application where implementing regulations aimed at reducing harm highlights a prioritization of positive future effects. This reflects a commitment to achieving the most favorable consequences for the environment and society as a whole. Both examples emphasize how consequentialism guides decisions by concentrating on the results they produce. When we talk about teleological ethics, the main idea is that morality is judged by the outcomes or goals of an action, not just the methods used to achieve them. This focus on ends means we look at what the action ultimately accomplishes to determine if it's right or wrong. Next, teleological ethics is very much goal-oriented. Moral decisions are assessed based on how well they align with desired purposes or final states. It's about aiming for the best possible result or the intended objective. Another important feature is context sensitivity. Judgments consider the specific circumstances and potential consequences surrounding an action. This means that what might be right in one situation could be wrong in another, depending on the context. Finally, teleology shares some common ground with virtue ethics and consequentialism, but remains distinct in its focus. While these approaches overlap in certain elements, teleological ethics is unique in how it prioritizes the ends or goals as the central factor for moral evaluation. Here we see the distribution of utility in a simplified population, represented by this pie chart. The largest segment, making up 60%, represents the majority who benefited. This indicates that most individuals experienced positive outcomes. Then we have a smaller group, about 30%, who saw no change. They neither gained nor lost utility. Finally, the smallest slice, 10%, corresponds to the minority who were actually harmed. This visualization helps us understand the varied impacts on the population and highlights that while most benefit, there are still those who experience negative effects. Ethical egoism is a moral theory that suggests an action is right if it promotes the agent's own self-interest. Essentially, it places individual benefit at the center of ethical decision-making. Supporters of this view argue that it makes morality practical by aligning moral actions with what is best for ourselves personally. However, critics point out that focusing solely on self-interest can lead to conflicts with the greater good or collective well-being. The image here, with a single yellow figurine standing out among many red ones, represents this idea of individual uniqueness and prioritizing one's own interests within a group setting. Rule consequentialism is a moral theory that emphasizes the importance of following rules that, when generally accepted, produce the best overall outcomes. This differs from act consequentialism, which evaluates each action on its own merits. Instead, rule consequentialism looks at the broader impact of consistently following certain rules. Now let's consider some illustrative social rules that align with this approach. For example, the rule against lying in contracts promotes trust and economic stability when widely observed. Universal basic education enhances social well-being and broadens economic opportunities for many people. Additionally, fair voting procedures are essential for democratic legitimacy and social cohesion. The colored bars next to each rule visually represent their relative expected benefits, helping us see which rules have the most positive impact overall. Here we're comparing two key ethical theories, consequentialism and deontology. Consequentialism is all about the outcomes of our actions. It suggests that the right choice is the one that brings the greatest overall benefit or happiness. This approach allows for flexibility, meaning decisions can change depending on the specific situation and what will cause the best results. On the other hand, deontology focuses on duties and moral rules. It insists that some actions are inherently right or wrong, no matter the consequences. This perspective upholds individual rights as sacred and non-negotiable. So it's less about the outcomes and more about following ethical principles consistently. Understanding these differences helps us navigate complex moral dilemmas by weighing results against rigid moral duties. Here, we're focusing on how consequentialist theories can guide our approach to social ethics by looking at three key areas. First, healthcare policy. This involves promoting interventions that not only improve population health, but also make the best use of available resources. Next, criminal justice reform. Our goal here is to implement practices that reduce harm overall while enhancing safety and fairness within society. Finally, social welfare programs. Allocating resources effectively to programs that genuinely improve well-being and alleviate hardship is crucial. The image of the wooden gavel reminds us of the importance of justice and authority as we consider these ethical applications. Together, these areas reflect how outcomes can drive ethical decision-making that benefits society as a whole. Here, we explore three case studies that highlight complex ethical decisions in social contexts. First, vaccine allocation during a public health crisis required prioritizing at-risk populations. The key challenge was balancing the need to protect the most vulnerable while ensuring fair access for everyone. Next, emergency resource triage deals with distributing limited medical resources during urgent situations. The ethical dilemma centers on how to weigh the severity of cases against the likelihood of survival to achieve the best overall outcomes. Finally, criminal justice reform focuses on pilot programs aimed at changing sentencing and rehabilitation policies. This raises important questions about fairness and the impact these reforms have on communities while striving to reduce repeat offenses. Each case presents unique challenges that require careful ethical consideration to guide effective and just decision-making. Here, we explore some of the main challenges and criticisms faced by consequentialism. First, under demandingness, consequentialism often asks individuals to make extreme sacrifices, which can be difficult to accept in practical moral situations. Next, the issue of justice and rights is a significant concern. Critics argue that focusing solely on outcomes can sometimes violate individual rights or fail to properly uphold justice. Moving on to measurement problems, it's often hard to quantify and compare different outcomes, making consistently reliable decisions a real challenge. Finally, uncertainty and prediction highlight that accurately foreseeing all consequences is nearly impossible, which undermines how dependable consequentialist decision-making can be. These points illustrate why consequentialism, despite its strengths, faces important obstacles in ethical theory and application. Here, we look at modern perspectives and applications through two important lenses. First, policy design. This involves using cost-benefit frameworks in public policy to carefully evaluate potential outcomes, helping decision-makers make well-informed choices. It's all about balancing risks and rewards for the best possible impact. On the other side, we have AI ethics. This focuses on outcome-focused safety assessments that guide how algorithms are developed and deployed, ensuring they adhere to ethical standards and minimize harm. The icons, a scroll for policy and a gavel for ethics, help visually anchor these concepts. Together, these approaches shape thoughtful, responsible progress in today's complex environment. Here's a summary of the key points to keep in mind. First, the core idea of consequentialism is that it judges morality based on the outcomes and how they affect overall well-being. Essentially, the rightness or wrongness of actions depends on their results. Moving on to the major forms, there are several important variants like utilitarianism, ethical egoism, and rule consequentialism. Each of these focuses on different ways to evaluate outcomes, whether it's maximizing general happiness, self-interest, or following rules that lead to the best consequences over time. Lastly, while consequentialism is widely applied in areas like policy making and social ethics, it does encounter some criticisms. These include challenges around measuring outcomes accurately and concerns about rights that may get overlooked when only focusing on consequences. Understanding these strengths and limits gives us a clearer picture of how consequentialism functions in ethical discussions. Now, let's open the floor for questions and discussion. Think about when outcomes should take precedence over established moral rules. Is there ever a situation where breaking a moral rule is justified for a better result? Also, consider how policymakers can effectively measure social welfare. What metrics or criteria should they use to ensure fairness and well-being for everyone? Another important point to reflect on is whether consequentialism, which focuses on outcomes, can truly respect individual rights without compromising them. Feel free to share your thoughts or questions. You can type them in the chat or simply raise your hand if you'd like to speak. I'm looking forward to hearing your perspectives. Thank you all for your attention today. Consequentialist thinking remains a powerful tool for navigating ethical decisions in our increasingly complex world. If you're interested in diving deeper, I've listed some key readings here, including foundational works by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, as well as recent articles that explore contemporary applications and policy implications of consequentialist ethics. I encourage you to continue the conversation and explore these ideas further. Please feel free to reach out to me at the contact information provided. It's been a pleasure sharing this with you.